Hi, everybody. We're just going to wait until a few more people get into the webinar. So just give us another 10 seconds or so. So I want to welcome everybody to our latest Maximizing Your Membership webinar here at CFIB. It's been a while since I've done one of these webinars. So if you're a returning member, we are glad to have you back. And if you're new, well, welcome. I'm glad that you can join us. My name is Corinne Pullman. I am the Executive Vice President for Advocacy at CFIB. I am based in Ottawa, and I'd love to see where you're coming from. I already see Lana has put it up there. Greetings from Elmer, Ontario. Nice to see you joining us, Lana. And hopefully others will join as well. So always great to see where people are coming from right across the country. We see Brantford and London and Toronto and Burlington. And we got first one from Edmonton, Vancouver Island, Timmins, Waterloo. So a lot from Ontario. We got a Fredericton, New Brunswick. I always like to see the Atlantic being represented. Of course, Vancouver Island again in BC. Montreal, good to see Montreal in the house. Boisbriand as well, and St. John's. Red Deer, Charlottetown. They're coming in fast and furious now. So always, always awesome to see where our members are coming from right across the country. And also helps us to know where you're coming from and when we're talking about some of the things we're going to be talking about today. In addition to myself, I also want to introduce my colleague, Rachel. Say hello, Rachel. Rachel is someone who I worked with a lot on webinars a few years back. If you were on those webinars, Rachel I actually went off on parental leave for a while and only recently came back. So we're all excited to have Rachel back here as well. And she'll be joining me today and talking a little bit about what's going on with Parliament, what's going on with tariffs, etc. Before I do that, a couple pieces of housekeeping. First, of course, is that on the bottom of the presentation in front of you, there is a Q&A. Please use the Q&A button if you have a question. We will endeavor to get to as many questions as possible. Many of you also sent questions in advance, so we'll certainly try to cover as many of those as we can as well. There's also a chat function, which many of you just used in order to share with me where you're coming from today. You're welcome to use that, but we really encourage you, of course, to use the Q&A for the questions simply because it's easier for us to follow because questions can get lost in the chat very quickly. Last thing is there is a copy of this presentation in the chat. It is at the very beginning of the chat. Nope, but we had my colleague Hemkesh add it again. So you'll see at the chat is a copy of this presentation. If you want to download it for yourself and follow along that way, you're more than welcome to do so. Okay, so we're going to jump into the webinar now and tell you a little bit about what's going on. We're going to talk a little bit about what is going on in Ottawa. And the fact is Parliament is back in session for not that it didn't go into session in the spring, but it was a very short session. This is our first sort of more lengthy session, so we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to get into, of course, some of the tariff and trade issues that have been happening over the course of the last several months and some of the more updated things that have been going on there. And then we'll sort of get into a Q&A as well. And so, of course, as you can see, well, I guess we've already flipped to the next slide. Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to suggest on the right-hand side there, of course, is something that we found kind of funny. And I think what's great is this is really, I know the Canadian and the the feeling of patriotism that has sort of come over Canada over the course of the last several months has been maintained to a great degree, which has been really great to see. And I'm hoping that many of you have benefited from Canadians focusing more on Canadian businesses and Canadian products. So it's something that I want to talk about again a bit later in the presentation. So now we can flip to the next slide. So what's going on in Ottawa? Let's just start there. Of course, as I said, there was an election last spring. We did do a webinar around that time. We have a new prime minister. And over the summer, we had the official leader of the opposition, the head of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, also win a seat out of Alberta. So this is the first time, actually starting just last week, that the new prime minister and opposition leader have faced each other in the House. So it'll be interesting to see how that sort of translates over the course of the next few months as we go through the government's agenda. These are the priorities that the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, put forward in his mandate letters to his ministers. These are really the agenda of this federal government. It's looking at the relationship with the United States, given that that was really probably what got him elected in the first place, of course, is that particular relationship, removing barriers to interprovincial trade, infrastructure projects, bringing down costs, housing, some things around keeping Canadians safe, so around investment in the armed forces, securing the borders, law enforcement, talking about immigration, and of course, spending less on government operations. These are the mandates that they've put forward. Of course, time will tell if any or all of these will be somehow addressed by the government, but that is what they're saying they're going to try to do. If we go to the next slide, you'll see that this is where we're focusing ourselves. So we have a budget this fall. Normally budgets are in the spring. They're usually in sort of March, April, usually April. Of course, we did not have one this past spring because we had an election instead. And when they did come into the House, they had made the decision to put it off. We now have a date. The budget is going to be tabled on November 4th. So we've been working really hard and trying to make sure we get our members' priorities in front of the government prior to that budget on April 4th. And we've been spending a lot of the last, I'd say, 4 to 6 months doing just that, given all the new faces that were introduced as a result of the last election. First and foremost, tariffs. We're going to talk a bit more about that, but our number one ask is making sure that the money being collected by many of you in the form of tariffs, when the counter tariffs are put into place by Canada, are going to be returned to affected small businesses. That one we'll talk about a bit more. The carbon tax, for those of you that live in the provinces that had a federal carbon tax, as you know, that was returned mostly to you last December, but there's still some money remaining. So more of that money should be returned to you before the end of this year. It's 1 year's worth. It's not I think it was 2.4 billion that was returned last year. This will be around 600 million, still a lot of money. We're pushing hard for them to return it sooner rather than later. But we also want to make sure that that money is returned to you in a non-taxable format. Initially, the government was planning to tax that rebate back to you, but they have since agreed to not tax it, but we need the legislation for that to go into effect. But it is in effect right now under CRA. It's just not legally in effect yet. So those are some of the things that we're going to try to get done. Same thing with the capital gains increase. So the lifetime capital gains exemption was increased to 1.25 million from $1 million. Again, it was never legislated. However, it was announced. So CRA has been honoring it since the spring. But in terms of taxation, which is really where I think the rubber hits the road for many of you, that's of course where the big costs are. We're really pushing hard for them to lower the small business tax rate, increase the small business deduction under which you get the small business tax rate, which is currently at 500,000, getting up to 700,000, and even indexing it moving forward. And finally, some internal trade work. There is more than this that we're doing, but this is sort of the highlights of what we're really hoping to see in this budget. And internal trade is definitely an area too that we've been doing a lot of work in and like to see more progress being made. Rachel, you have a question.
I don't have a question, but maybe just a shout out to our members and thank you guys. Like obviously all of these come from you, right? And the fact that you guys are filling out the surveys, right? So yeah, just a shout out to you guys for that.
Thanks, Rachel. That's a good one to do. Okay, so let's see what happens on November 4th. Hopefully there will be some relief for many of you on that particular budget, but only time will tell. So we'll move to the next slide. And I am going to turn it over to you, Rachel, on the tariffs.
For sure. We know it's been a ride, right? It's been tough keeping track of all the different moving pieces on the US Canada tariffs. So we kind of wanted to put a slide in here for you guys just to see what is currently in effect. So some key points on the US tariffs on Canadian imports here are the top two. So 35% tariffs on all imports that don't comply with CUSMA, And I think that's really important because I think people get a little bit nervous when they don't realize that this actually, like, it just applies to, if you're CUSMA compliant, then it's kind of business as usual, right? The second bullet point there is just for if you try to get around these 35% tariffs by routing goods through other countries, then US Customs will apply a 40% tariff. So yeah, kind of see where they're coming from on that. I guess they were seeing quite a bit of it, likely even through Canada. But yeah, that's key things to keep in mind. And then the other bullet points down there are actually more sectoral. But I think the key thing to keep in mind is that if you have questions, feel free to double check with your customs broker, and make sure that like the tariffs that are being applied really do apply to you. And if you feel that there's something a little fishy going on, feel free to send them our way, and then we'll try to help you get some clarifications on that. On the Canadian side of things, yeah, Corinne, did you want to mention anything?
I just wanted to mention, of course, that the elimination of the US de minimis, we'll get into this in more detail in a minute, but I know for many of you, this is actually a big deal. And so we don't want to think we're brushing over it. We're not. We're actually going to talk into a bit more detail, given that the elimination of that has had a significant impact on quite a number of you. So we'll talk about that a bit more in a sec.
For sure. Thanks, Corinne. On the Canadian side, there are 25% tariffs on all imports that are not CUSMA compliant. And for those of you who have non-CUSMA compliant goods, if you feel like you should get remission, there is an application process that we've linked in this slide. Anything that's kind of a different color is probably a link. But yeah, we've been hearing from members that it's been difficult to navigate remission. And unfortunately, we're also hearing that Finance Canada has confirmed that their process takes sometimes 3 months or even longer to get back to give responses on these remissions. And I do know that they are super burdensome. There's a lot of paperwork and there's a lot of detail that maybe you might not want to share with them, right? But keep in mind that those who do apply earlier might have a slight competitive advantage over their competitors who are asking for those remissions.
So a couple questions here, Rachel, that maybe we can just tackle very quickly. One is, why are potash and energy apparently considered non-CUSMA compliant? Which I think they answered their own question. This is from Sean. Is it all potash and all energy then is tariffed?
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, if it's not CUSMA compliant, then it will be tariffed at the end of the day. Yeah, there's a few instances on the aluminum and steel import side that I can think of where even if you have CUSMA compliant goods, there are other sections, other orders that kind of apply to those goods, despite them being part of a trade agreement. But these are really specific as well. So again, the response is double check with your customs broker first. And if you feel like there's something that doesn't make sense, then we're happy to try to get some clarification for you.
And then the other is coming from Jordan, and it has to do with where can we go to find out if goods are CUSMA compliant. So do you want to give a quick overview on what to do in that circumstance?
Yeah, we have some more later in the slides, but yeah, we've done a lot of work on trying to get the word out there on how to determine if your goods are CUSMA compliant. It's not really like a place that you have to apply, and get a certain certificate. It's more just like a declaration with each of your shipped goods. That you need to make sure with your importing documents that you provide the origin of the goods and the importer and the suppliers and whatnot. And that kind of goes with your shipment. And so that they know that it is a Canadian good. Yeah, but we do have a website on it. We have a lot of resources. Corinne has done a webinar on it as well. So we'll kind of touch on that a little bit more later.
Yeah. We have a link in this particular deck that you'll be able to use to help you with that a little bit in a second. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. So this slide is really just to give you, this comes from you and many of the members just like you across the country, telling us a little bit about their experiences so far with tariffs. What has had the biggest impact has been the steel and aluminum tariffs, as well as the Canadian counter tariffs. This was done just prior to the Canadians removing some of the Canadian counter tariffs on CUSMA compliant goods. So steel and aluminum, that is both for those that are exporting and importing. So it's combined both the US tariffs and the Canadian tariffs together, because both of them, of course, still exist. And almost 60% of our members have been directly or indirectly affected by those tariffs. And then the Canadian counter tariffs were right behind it. And this, again, as I said, has some of them have been removed on CUSMA compliant goods. We don't know how that would affect this number. I imagine it would come down quite a bit. However, of course, if the good that you're importing from the United States is not CUSMA compliant, you are still going to be paying that 25% tariff. If it is on the list that the government had first published back in, I think, March it was. So we can help you with that if you're still wondering about that. And thirdly, which is why we're going to talk about a bit more, is almost 40% are affected by the elimination of the US de minimis, which was allowing up to $800 US into the United States without any duties or taxes. That is now down to zero. So we are going to talk about that a little bit more as well. If we go to the next slide, none of this will be a surprise, but we thought we'd share with you what members generally are feeling, of course, about the impacts of the tariffs. Higher expenses, reduced profits, reduced revenues are hitting between 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 3 businesses across the country, as well as supply chain disruptions. And of course, importers are more likely to see higher expenses. Exporters are more likely to report reduced profits and revenues. And the ones that we're looking at really closely are those that are looking at canceling orders, that are looking to canceling investments, that are even looking to layoffs. Of course, those are the ones we are also worried about as well and watching closely. We share this information with government to really try to reinforce the impacts are much broader than they think. And therefore, that when they think about supports, that they have to go broad in their supports, because this is having a pretty big impact right across the small business community. Okay, I think we're going to head over to the next slide. And I believe, Rachel, it's back to you.
Yeah, for sure. We're understandably not only hearing about American tariffs, so we kind of need to talk about Chinese tariffs as well. Yeah, they're impacting a lot of our farmers right now. So canola products, seeds, peas, pork, lobster, crab, shrimp, and thought we would kind of put these out here in case you needed to know about them. We do have a website where we're keeping everything current and updated. So yeah, we're doing a lot of work on this, and maybe it's interesting for you guys to be aware of that, because we're not just one sector, and we have this ability to speak on a lot of different businesses, right? We have a unique voice at CFIB on this, so we're looking to do a lot more work on this. So if you guys are impacted by these Chinese tariffs, and you want to chat, let us know, and I'm all ears, to be quite honest. Yeah, and I think we'll go on to the next slide.
Yeah, so we're going to bring it back to the de minimis and talk a little bit about what's happened. So as of the end of August, so it's really only been a few weeks now, shipments to the US that are under $800 US, as I mentioned earlier, are no longer duty and tariff free. However, they are going to be treated the same as any other product that would be that'll be sent into the United States. So that if it is CUSMA compliant, you are able to still do that duty-free and tax-free if it is under the NAFTA agreement, sort of the CUSMA agreement. So that is something that I think some of you who may be relying more heavily on the de minimis exemption may want to look into figuring out if that is the case or not for your particular product. Now, you may have more than one product, so it does get more complicated. And we already know that this has had a pretty big negative impact across the board, particularly in wholesale, personal, miscellaneous service, retail, and manufacturing sectors who have tended to use these. A few comments on the right-hand side you may be able to relate to a certain degree. Now, we don't know how many of those folks, the 30% or so that are using it, use it on a regular basis or just every once in a while. But we've certainly heard from many of you through our phones, and we thank you for giving us a call and telling us about what this means for your business, because it's really important for us to understand that in order to really emphasize to the federal government the impacts this is having. In fact, I will also say that the US Embassy itself has contacted us and asked for some feedback on what this impact would look like. So even the Americans are interested in learning a bit more. So your stories really help us understand what it is that we can then relay on to governments to hopefully pressure them a little bit to figure out ways that we can work around this. Many of you, I think, also asked about whether this is something that could be returned in the near future or something that could potentially go back to what it was in the near future. And we just simply don't have an answer to that question. I think we've all experienced over the last 7, 8 months the constant change that is going on, the ups and downs, the never really knowing if it's going to get worse or going to get better. So it'd be really difficult for us to predict if this is something that would ever come back. My sense, if I'm giving you my personal sense, is it's not going to come back soon. If it did, I suspect it would be part of a negotiation under the CUSMA agreement that we'll talk about shortly, that they are looking at renewing right now. So that has until July of next year to be renewed. So it could be a while before it does come back if that is something that gets put back into place. But it is something I know many of you are dealing with. So we want to give you a few ideas on how you might be able to manage this. So I'm going to turn this back over to Rachel to walk you through a few of the options you may have if you find yourself in this situation.
Yeah, for sure. If we can go to that next slide, that would be great. Um, a lot of members have been saying, well, what do I do now? I've been so used to just putting my shipments with a carrier and not needing to do much. I mean, there's still stuff to do, but now really the key takeaway from the slide is all shipments now require full trade documentation because the de minimis is no longer there for goods valued at 800 or less, right? But the in these conversations, often we say, well, are your goods CUSMA compliant? Because as I mentioned before, if your goods are CUSMA compliant, it's kind of just work as usual. If you are, we have some tips that we kind of collected from Canada Post, UPS, and FedEx. They've been kind of saying, well, make sure you always provide your commercial invoice for each shipment. Make sure your certification of origin is included. The best thing to do is to use an electronic or digital copy when possible. I've definitely heard UPS has had issues scanning their documents and packages being returned because they felt pictures were blurry, right? Make sure you budget some time to navigate and confirm your CUSMA compliance with your carrier or broker or freight forwarder. And if you're using an alternate broker like FreightCom, our member, make sure that your carrier also allows that. So these are some key things to keep in mind to make sure that the process goes smoothly. If you don't know if you can become CUSMA compliant, as we mentioned before, there's a huge amount of resources that we and other organizations, agencies have put together. So we've kind of made it a quick post there, but we have a lot on our website as well. And you can always feel free to call our business resource advisors who can kind of walk you through some of this. If your goods are not CUSMA compliant, then you kind of have to expect the 35% US tariffs. And on top of that, there may be other sectoral tariffs that kind of get added on top of it, which I've heard it can be super intense. So then you have to have this conversation of if you can absorb the cost, if your clients can absorb the cost. And I know that's a really tough conversation to have. So alternatives that we suggest are always, can you make your goods CUSMA compliant? Are there other markets that you can kind of explore? We've also added there a link to the other free trade agreements that are out there. And at the end there, just as we continuously say, feel free to share your stories with us because they really help our work. And it really humanizes the issues for MPs.
So maybe this is a good time, Rachel, to ask you or have a discussion around Lydia's question. So Lydia was asking, determining something is CUSMA compliant is very complicated for her industry. Made in Canada versus the source of the inputs of the manufacturer of those items. Apparently, made in Canada is not good enough to confirm compliance, and she wants us to explain this. So take
Yeah.
a first crack, and I'll
For
fill in.
sure, for sure. So made in Canada versus made in Canada is more a labeling issue, the way that I understand it, right? We've actually had conversations with the Competition Bureau about this and whether we need to do more clarification for small businesses on this. But it's more what you're showing to customers, and whether that will pose a competitive advantage or not, in that decision making of purchasing that item. And it kind of allows clients to discern, well, how much of this was actually made in Canada versus the CUSMA compliance is where is the origin of the goods from, right? Just because I have a good that's sold from a Canadian company, like maybe it's Japanese paper, for example, clearly that good originates from somewhere else. And so that item should still be tariffed.
Yes, and so she goes on, which I think is a very good question to say, like, what does substantially transformed in Canada mean? In her particular circumstance, they're making clothing items, and so they're bringing fabric in from somewhere else, but they're making it into something in Canada, but they're still not considered to be CUSMA compliant. So, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, clothing is really tricky because there are parts of CUSMA that kind of say, like, depending on the yarn that you use, if that yarn actually comes from other countries, then that can make you non-CUSMA compliant. It can get really technical, so happy to kind of take that offline and see if we can kind of support her, but at the end of the day, there's certain ways that maybe she'll have to find different sources of the yarn, for example, to make it CUSMA compliant.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important point. I agree with you. I think clothing in particular is tricky. But if you're not selling clothing, what does it mean to be substantially transformed? That is a bit of a gray area, to be honest. And that is one where a consultant or a broker could potentially help you basically figure out how you defend the substantial transformation of that product, right? And so that can then become CUSMA compliant. So that's why when Rachel suggests, can you make it CUSMA compliant? That could be maybe you're changing one of the sources that goes into that product that's more Canadian, even if two or three other pieces of it are not. But if it's a substantial transformation, then that's the part that there is a bit of gray area that could potentially still make it CUSMA compliant. So talking to a broker, talking to a consultant, even trying to give us a call, we can maybe explain it a bit more if you're confused, which is totally understandable. This is confusing stuff. We'd be happy to try and help as much as we can. Okay. Should we move on to the next slide? And we'll come back to some of these other questions closer to the end. Don't worry, we have them all here. I want to move on a little bit to what are some of the supports the government has announced. So about 2 weeks ago, the federal government did announce a series of measures meant to sort of help with the tariff situation in Canada. This is just a summary, even though I know it's a lot of words, so I apologize for that in advance, but there's more to all of this than what's here. But I just quickly want to talk to you about some of them. Probably the most relevant for you as a small business owner would be the Regional Tariff Response Initiative, is what it's called. This is going to be a funding program of up to $1 billion over 3 years. That's going to allow for non-repayable and repayable contributions to businesses. They are going to be delivered through regional development agencies. And Rachel's going to just come back up in a minute to sort of give you a bit more detail about that one, because that's the one that will most likely be the one that you may want to look at if you're looking for a little bit of financial support. But I also wanted to mention a few others. There are some changes to the loans they provide to farmers, given some of the Chinese tariffs in particular. Those are also being enhanced, especially for producers and canola growers who are being directly impacted by the Chinese tariffs. There is going to be some money put into retraining and upskilling employees, including potentially some training dollars going to employers. That piece we're still trying to figure out. So of course, if you're at a point where you're thinking you may have to potentially let people go or lay people off temporarily, there may be some things around there that could be helpful. For the workers themselves, they're extending some of the EI rules so that they can help them get on EI, especially for long tenured workers. We had some concerns with some of this. I mean, we're not opposed to it at all. We were just hoping that this would be paid for through some of the counter tariff money and not through the funds that you and your employees pay into. Unfortunately, much of that is going to be paid for out of the EI account. However, we just learned that EI will go down next year, 1 cent for employees and 3 cents for employers, or 2 cents for employers. I can't quite remember. So not a lot, but at least it's not going up at this point. And then there's been a real focus in many different ways on buying Canadian. Obviously, Canadians themselves have been putting a lot of time and effort into doing that and trying to be much more aware of where they shop and what they purchase. But the Canadian government as well is creating some buy Canadian policies in a much bigger way than they ever have before, including, they say, a small and medium business procurement program to help small companies navigate federal procurement if that is something that is of interest to you. But I do want to share a little bit more about the Regional Tariff Response Initiative, so I'm going to bring Rachel back up to go over that in a bit more detail with you guys about what we know so far, because there's a lot of details missing at the moment. So if we can go
For
to the next slide,
sure.
please.
For sure. I mean, essentially what you need to know is the Regional Tariff Response Initiative is a loan program that actually it used to be available only to specific sectors like steel and aluminum, and now it's made available to all businesses who were impacted by the tariff and counter tariffs. Some businesses can apply to get a non-repayable loan. I say some businesses because these are actually administered by the regional development agencies. And they kind of administer these programs differently depending on the region that they're in. So some may have different rules than others, which is why we kind of struggle to give you all the answers right away on this slide as well, because as you can see in this table here, the Quebec one isn't available yet. It's coming soon. And some of them have been kind of coming in with different rules. Yeah, maybe minimum employee requirements are slightly different as well. But again, things to keep in mind is that applicants will have to propose their eligible projects related to digitization, automation, market expansion, supply chain optimization, reshoring, R&D, and talent, amongst other things. Some RDAs are actually prioritizing certain sectors, and some are just saying, well, the money is available up until we don't have any more. But yeah, as I mentioned, we've included kind of this list and whether they're accepting applications, and we'll definitely be keeping our website version updated on a regular basis to keep you updated on it. Maybe I'll bring Corinne back. Oh, actually, never mind. If we can go to the next slide. So for those of you who are looking for government support on this is a slide that we've kind of shown you before, but just thought you should be aware that there's the Trade Commissioner Service, and they can offer some funding and support programs and international opportunities. And we have some good links there. There's the BDC that provides some financing options. We've recently discovered that they have a new one called the Pivot to Grow loan that might be interesting to you if that's something you're looking for. EDC is great for getting insurance on some of your projects internationally. And then ESDC, I always like to kind of do a shout out to their work sharing program, which we've done a lot of work on. And we've heard have helped businesses manage temporary layoffs. Yeah. And then again, just kind of wanted to bring back the fact that there is this remission process um, for exceptional tariff relief cases. Again, I've heard that it can be quite a burden to do, and you might not hear back, but you know, if you're at this point where you need to try anything, um, it's definitely worthwhile. So let's just go to the next slide. And I think I'll pass this one back to Corinne.
Yes, so we're wanting to talk a little bit, of course, all of this is partly, hopefully, going to be maybe not resolved, but at least we'll have a bit more certainty once we can get through this CUSMA review. So CUSMA, as you may recall, was introduced about 6 years ago. It replaced NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement that had been around for a very long time. It was actually under President Trump that this CUSMA was created in his first term. But the review was sort of set as right from the very beginning that by July of 2026, they would review the agreement to make sure everybody was still happy with it. Many are speculating that it will be more than just a review, that may even be a renegotiation of CUSMA. You know, we do a lot of interactions with other organizations, with people who sort of study this stuff on a regular basis to sort of understand, is there even going to be a Canada, US, Mexico agreement moving forward? Most of the pundits I've spoken to or have heard from have said that they do believe that this is still of interest to the United States to have some sort of North American trading bloc. Whether it's CUSMA or another version of this is what we don't know. Of course, this does include Canada, US, and Mexico, and the ultimate goal is to remove most tariffs and duties on anything that's produced, manufactured, harvested, whatever, in any of those three countries. So at that point, like I said, any of the countries can, by July 2026, propose changes or withdraw from the agreement. It will likely become one, I believe, that will have changes made to it. I don't know necessarily that, despite the difficult periods we've been going through right now, whether anybody would actually withdraw. But who knows when it comes to President Trump. Consultations have actually begun. And so just last week, it started with Mexico, then the United States, and then finally Canada at the end of last week have all launched consultations, public consultations, on what should be done with CUSMA. So if you're interested in providing feedback, you can do so. So we should have put the link there, but if you just Google Canada CUSMA consultations, you'll see that the public consultations are open for anyone. And I think they have until early November to provide feedback to the government on what types of changes you'd like to see or what you want to make sure is kept under the current CUSMA agreement. Of course, we ourselves are preparing a lengthy document as well to submit to this particular consultation. We've actually done one in a previous consultation earlier this summer. And we'll do a more formal one for this one. So we'd love to hear from you. If you have anything you want to add or think we should be aware of, please share your thoughts directly with us at Ottawa CFIB at CFIB.ca. It would be super helpful as we sort of try to better understand how to make this agreement as useful as possible for smaller companies within Canada. So we want to talk about one more controversial thing on the next slide, and I'm going to bring Rachel up. I'm going to stay up though, and I'm going to let Rachel sort of start off because this is one that has been an incredibly frustrating for many of you that import. So Rachel, do you want to chat a bit about
for sure. I
CARM?
mean, I continue to hear from members about how much they love CARM. It definitely takes up a lot of some of my calls. But know that we are continuously doing a lot on this. We're sharing it at a lot of different committees, and I know our senior policy analyst Michelle Auger is definitely like very keen to make this move. So what we've done is we've created an advocacy template letter so that you guys can also get it out to your MPs. And then they will help us put the pressure on to kind of make changes happen, right? There's already some movement going on this on our end. So yeah, anything that you guys can do, and feel free to share this with other businesses that you know are really being impacted by CARM and how frustrating it is, right? It's not a simple process. We know that businesses are struggling to get registered for RPP, release to prior payment. Yeah, all importers are now required to be registered to CBSA's portal now.
Yeah, we know that some of you have had your goods stuck at the border because you hadn't put up your security. The big difference between this and obviously the old way of importing, well, two things. One is the old way was very paper-based. This is an electronic system now. However, the other big change is it used to be that your broker would manage any sort of security costs to get the goods released at the border without you actually having to physically go to the border to get it. And they've moved that responsibility to the importer now. So they do require anybody who's importing into Canada, if you want your goods to be released at the border without you having to physically be at the border to do that, you have to provide a surety, a security bond, or a cash deposit equivalent to the amount of duties you may have paid in a previous year. This can be substantial for some small businesses, and it is a new cost, which is unfortunate. But because so many smaller businesses don't necessarily import that often, they have found themselves sort of stuck because they don't know they had to register. They didn't know they had to put up the security in order to get their goods released, and now they're stuck at the border. And so we do have some information there that Rachel shared that you can try to go to. And if you're really stuck, you can also give us a call if this is happening to you. I do know, Rachel, though, that they did have a bit of a 1 month, I think, leniency where they kind of had because they had warehouses full of stuff that they couldn't get released. So they released all those things without the security for about 1 month, but I believe that time period may be
It's
expired
definitely
now.
passed. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when businesses tell me that they had their goods stuck at the border, I recommend that they try to go through the regular routes, right? Go through CBSA's web form there. It'll create some sort of ticket. And then if you don't hear back from anyone, feel free to message us, because we do have a contact at CBSA who's been super helpful in connecting with our members on what they need, because obviously CARM is pretty complex. There's different parts of the registration that you may not have finished, or it may just be the RPP portion of it. Maybe something to mention, a small win on our end, is that you can pay for RPP using your credit card now. Seems like that would be straightforward, but it wasn't to CBSA. But there's still lots to be fixed on that. And if you have frustrations or irritants on that, feel free to put them in the chat, or send us an email on those. Happy to have those conversations.
Great. And I just saw your comment, Dave, about customs clearance would be easier for foreign vendors can be bothered to fill out the commercial invoices accurately. Yes, well, that would be another issue. But thank you for sharing that. That is true as well. Okay, we're going to move to the next slide, and just a quick sort of I guess pitch. We do have these posters. This has been something that has continued to, I think, keep Canadians focused, and being able to sort of show that you're a Canadian company owned, so that people can find you if they're certainly, as they are continue to do, focusing on buying Canadian. Feel free to download the poster, put it up in your window. I've been so pleased to see here in Ottawa a number of businesses having this up in their windows to really show their support for Canadian owned. So I just wanted to make a pitch that is still available if it's something that's of interest to you. Okay, we're going to go to questions now. Spend a few minutes doing that. We're going to take down the deck so you can see both Rachel and I at the same time. So Rachel, if you want to come back on board. So I've asked our colleagues in the back if they can. Okay, so I want to start with Jordan's question. Jordan was asking, so if you're importing goods from China, then forwarding them to the US, do you pay tariffs on imports and exports? And do you pay US tariffs on Chinese goods plus non-CUSMA penalties when it crosses the US border? So this goes back to that transshipment, I think, idea. Do you have a quick thought on that?
Uh, I mean, yeah, you could be paying twice for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, but there are programs like the duty relief or duty drawback programs, and the option of a bonded warehouse as well. Maybe you can use those to avoid paying Canadian duties. Um, like if they're only passing through. Uh, those are some quick thoughts on my end.
Yeah, and it's, it's obviously the Americans, if it's a Chinese good, even if it's coming through Canada, they're going to probably charge you the Chinese tariff, which may be higher than the Canadian tariff as well, right? So again, depending on the goods, the US has imposed some pretty steep tariffs on Chinese products. So that is something you have to be very aware of. And I know a number of our members have got caught in as well. So yeah, so something to keep in mind as you bring products in from China and want to export them into the United States, that yes, you may get hit with pretty steep tariffs in that circumstance. So another one is goods being returned for credit to a US supplier with a country of origin being the USA. Are they subject to duties?
I think this one kind of confuses me a little bit, but like I guess it because generally if goods are being returned to you, you don't have to pay any duties. Um Now that's not saying that you won't have to pay for like taxes like GST, HST. But at least that's my initial take on things.
Yeah, and so this one could be a bit more challenging. So if you have a broker, you may want to just run it by them. But our thinking is you wouldn't have to, if it came from the US and you're just returning it. But, we have had a lot of business owners also get erroneously charged duties. That's another issue that we have seen. Simply because even at the customs side, the customs officers are a little confused by some of the different duties that are applied. And when you think about the United States in particular and how many tariffs they're applying on how many different countries, you can see where these things can happen. But on our first blush, we're thinking you wouldn't have to, but I would really suggest if you can and you have a broker to run that by them to be absolutely sure.
For sure. Yeah, that we've also helped some businesses in those situations where we can get clarification from CBSA or finance to figure out what's going on. But I find it's really hard just through like a paragraph comment to figure out exactly what's going
Yeah,
on without knowing what your HS codes are or anything, right? So maybe it's an offline conversation.
yeah. And I think that's similar to Michelle's question that I think you had flagged, right? Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, if anything, like yeah, Michelle was kind of asking if HS code changes, can a good become Kuzma compliant? And I think someone else kind of asked the same question. But yeah, definitely want to check with your customs broker to see if there are alternative HS codes that your goods can fall under, because yes, maybe it's just a matter of the way that you classify them, but we know that CBSA is really they can be sticklers about this if they decide to go after one specific sector or one specific HS code, and they will get retroactive tariffs duties from you. Yeah.
yeah. And I'm gonna jump over to Pavel. No, not Pavel. Oh, Lydia's comment. She said she had the exact same issue like Darlene, and she tried to return items via Canada Post to a vendor in New York, and they were going to charge her duties. So she decided not to return them. So I think it's best,
Maybe
Darlene,
that's
for you.
something, yeah,
Yeah,
for us to investigate a little bit more,
yeah,
Lydia and Darlene. Maybe I'll connect with you after the webinar.
yeah. So thank you, Lydia, for that comment. That's always helpful. Okay, the other one that you had flagged was from Kim. Does CFIB have a consultant on staff who can assist with substantial transformation status?
Unfortunately, no, but we do have uh, a lot of some of our team are really keeping a close eye on a lot of the policy changes. I'm mainly doing a shout out to Michelle Auger and Corinne, obviously. But yeah, so we have them keeping an eye on the changes on a daily basis, and then we also do have contacts at the I'm just trying to remember what the acronym stands for. Corinne, you may have to help me. The CSCB.
It's the
Uh,
Canadian Society of Customs Brokers.
Yeah, and sometimes they can kind of help us shed some light, and the fact that we can also ask CBSA or and Finance Canada is also very helpful in getting some clarifications.
Yeah. So similar to that, Pavel was asking where he can send the request for help for CBSA contact that you mentioned earlier, and mentioned that they applied for an export permit 2 weeks ago. CBSA support person on the phone told them it to be processed in 24 hours, but of course they haven't heard anything since. Getting help on the phone is very time consuming. I don't know that this is an unusual circumstance, Rachel. Unfortunately, Pavel, what you've experienced is what many of our members are experiencing. So I don't know if you can give us a call. We'll have the number up on the last slide, and that you can give us a call, and you'll be put through to Rachel through that process. And I can guarantee you we will get back to you within much less than 2 weeks' time, but definitely within 24 hours as well. So Rachel, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, that definitely get in contact with us because we might be able to figure out at least why they're taking so long. They also have a website that shows their processing times. So maybe that might be worth looking at to see if it's beyond that, because at that time when you connected with them, it might have been 24 hours, and then since then it's a week,
Yeah.
anything goes with these guys. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go back to Lillian's question though, about duty drawback, which I think is one that has come up a few times, right? She was wondering what the rules are in claiming duty drawback on US goods they pay tariffs on and then ship to a customer in the US.
Yeah, I think I would have to take that one back.
Okay,
Because I mean, if you've paid Canadian tariffs on US made goods, um, you might be able to apply for
yeah, duty
duty
drawback.
drawback. But the rules, I know they kind of, sorry, I'm kind of going into my memory here. They require that you show proof that duties were paid on imports and that the same goods were exported. Um, so I guess it depends. I think I'd have to know a little bit more.
No, that's fair. Duty drawback's a really complicated process in Canada, and just for others that may not know what it is, if you buy a product from another country, uh, do something with it, and then send it off to another country, if you pay duties on them coming into Canada, you may be able to get those duties back, as Rachel said, under certain rules and conditions, if you never sold it in Canada to a Canadian. So that is what duty drawback is. It's been around for decades. It's the Canadian process is quite complicated, unfortunately, and quite heavy. But we can give you more details, Lillian, if you want to give us a call again, we'll put that number up, or maybe I can have Beatrice in the back send you the phone number. Same with Pavel's as well. Of
I
how to
think we've included it in the chat there, but then we'll also
Excellent. All
have it
right.
in the deck as well. And I think if I'm remembering correctly, you have 4 years to apply for duty drawback.
Yeah,
But
there
yeah,
may be. I think you do have some time. Yeah.
yeah.
And finally, not finally, we have a couple more here, but Linda's asking, as a manufacturer, is there a percentage of foreign goods allowed in finished products and remain CUSMA compliant?
Oof, I feel like that's a customs broker question.
Yeah, but this goes to the substantial transformation definition, right? And so there is some foreign products allowed in the Canadian product. What proportion? I don't think that there's an exact answer. I think it really depends on, how it was transformed and what the final product looked like. And that's where exactly a broker or consultant who specializes in this can really provide you with the right advice to really let you know whether it's CUSMA compliant or not. But I think it's important to note that doesn't have to be 100% North American, but it has to be mostly that, or it has to be what they call substantially transformed. So, all right. So Michelle, we'll take your final question and then we'll probably wrap things up. Michelle, you talk about if we could speak a little bit about the EU trade agreement with Canada. And also that as a former owner of a retail shop, sells lots of goods from Canada, US, and the EU, but stop shipping to USA for now until we get it sorted. Okay, sorry about this. The US customer may not have to pay for items if they are CUSMA compliant. So is there a thing like partial duties if a US customer buys a sweater made in Ireland and a soap made in the US? Potentially. I think again, if these are two different products going into the United States, one is from Canada and the other is from Ireland, then yes, they probably would have to pay duties on part of the shipment and not another part. If they're combined into one product, then that's a different thing, and that's when the determination of whether it's CUSMA or compliant or not has to be made in advance. Now, the EU trade agreement with Canada is in effect. We do have a fairly robust trade agreement with the European Union. Most of the countries have ratified that particular agreement, so you do get many things duty and tax-free. I think it's up to 98% or so. So if there is a country in the European Union that you think could be an interesting option for you as a supplier or market, I would encourage you to reach out to the Trade Commissioner Service that Rachel shared some information with earlier. And they can potentially help you understand what it is that you need to do in order to be able to sell into those countries. And there may be some funding available through them as well to help you broaden your markets into the European Union as well. Okay, with that, I think I'd like to bring the presentation deck back up as we sort of come to the last few minutes of this webinar. And if we go to the next page. Wanted to let you know about a couple of other upcoming webinars before the end of the year, and there may be a few more than this, but we know for sure that on October 1st, we have a webinar called Get Paid on Time, Mastering Receivables Collection that is now open for registration. So that is really trying to figure out to make sure that you're getting every penny that you are deserving of when you are dealing with receivables. So that is going to be hosted by our colleague Jocelyn, who comes from our business resources area. So I think that's going to be, and she's going to be doing that in conjunction with Lavo, one of our partners on the legal aid side. So I think that could be of great interest to some of you. And of course, we're still going to do our end of year economic outlook with our chief economist, Simon Gaudreau. That'll probably be sometime in early December. So look out for that one. We're also thinking of one around the federal budget, should there be anything interesting for small businesses coming out of that budget. So look for that as well sometime in November. So that's the upcoming webinars for the moment. If you go to the next slide. Just want to remind you of our portal. A lot of resources. We made a few changes to this, but if you haven't checked out the member portal, I encourage you to do so. Again, lots of good information in there, including our discounts, our HR toolkits, some of our latest advocacy work. You can even join a member community. So I encourage you to take a look at the member portal. And then finally, I think on the next page, always looking to make ourselves a stronger organization. The more members we have, the more clout we have. We have reached over 100,000 members across Canada. That was something we accomplished early this year, and we're extremely proud and happy that you have joined us and many other small businesses across the country. But we could always add more. So if you think this information is useful for somebody else, please feel free to refer them to us, and we will certainly try our best to bring them on board. Okay, Rachel, any final thoughts from you?
Oh, I mean, I don't envy you guys really, but if you need help, we're here to help you. If you can keep track, keep everything clean in terms of your documented proof, it makes things easier in terms of when you're trying to make a case for yourself going forward. Also makes it easier to explain it to us, really. But yeah, keep in touch, and we're here for you. So yeah, don't forget to breathe.
Thanks, Rachel. I mind myself too. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate you showing the interest in these webinars. We'll continue to do them as long as you're interested in hearing about them. Of course, we strongly encourage you to give us a shout. If we didn't answer your question here today, we do our best to answer as many as we possibly can, but we are available to you if you have a question still that comes. And finally, I really want to encourage you to fill out those surveys. Incredibly important. One of my main jobs is being a lobbyist and trying to push for your issues here in Ottawa. Having that data is incredibly powerful with this government's, and so continue to do that when you can. And we really appreciate it because it's important for us to move the needle on the issues that are important to you. So thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And with that, we're going to sign off and close down the webinar.